Hash and circle up.
Welcome to On, the Hash House Harrier podcast for interviews, history, and stories. I'm your host, Ra.
Today we're in Gloucestershire in the UK with a longtime hasher, a bit of a historian. We're going to see an interesting publication on the history of the soon coming UK Nash hash. Welcome today on the podcast, Robo, the human sponge. Welcome.
Hello, Rob. Good afternoon. Nice to be here.
Yeah, you've got a great background. Maybe we'll talk about some of that stuff hanging behind you. But
it's just my dirty washing. It's my laundry day. Caught me.
Let's tell people your hashing origin story. When, where, and how did you get to your first hash?
I'm solely UK based. Discovered it in Gloucestershire. The hash was the Cheltenham hash, which was formed in 81. The origins of the Cheltenham hash were from Little Taiwan in Hong Kong. They were civil servants, so they came back and worked in the governmental buildings in Cheltenham. So that's the background. I missed run one. I was at a party, a 21st-year-old party. For some strange reason, I stayed in bed, and a lot of my friends got up and went hashing. So I didn't do run number one. I was a footballer, so I played football locally. Good football, a good standard locally. The call came on run number 3. A game was called off, nothing to do, so I just went along and found out where it was, really. So that was my introduction to hashing. It was like that.
How did you find out about run number 1 or run number 3?
Because it was civil service, they had postings in Hong Kong, and some of my friends, who were school friends, obviously we'd left, but it was someone's auntie or something like that. They obviously tried to get some youngsters along, etc. So they all went along, but I didn't venture along until run number 3. So that was my introduction to hashing, and I just thought it was in the area. I didn't realise the scale, even back in 81, which is quite a long time ago
now. 44 years.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that first trail?
Well, running around without actually seeing any markings, really, because you're running quick. I was only 20 then. You just following the guy in front or the girl in front, really. Markings, I can't remember seeing any markings, but you tune your eye, don't you, hashers? And just no matter where you are, you can spot a mark, a trail mark or something. There's an arrow. It must have been a hash through here a couple of days ago or something. You tune in that slowly. So that was my introduction. And then later that year was when the UK Nash hash started, which brings us back to Jerry Gurney and my interest in following in the event.
Let's just talk about that first trail that you did a little bit. What else happened in terms of circle or singing, and what did you just plan on? I'll be here every time I don't have a football match.
I didn't run regularly first. It was in the winter. This was a Sunday morning, which clashed with my soccer or football. And they switched in the spring, March, April time, to Monday nights. So that's when I started to run regular, when it was warm and etc. They didn't bring a circle. They didn't have songs. I'm not sure we even had down-downs, to be honest. That all came as the years went by, really. No, we didn't have a strict GM or JM or whatever that was going to sing a bawdy song. Not in an English pub. Certainly that wasn't going to happen. In fact, I didn't know songs happened until I started to venture overseas, really.
You went to the first UK Nash hash before you went to any overseas things. How many different clubs were there? What was your impression of that?
I would have to check on the book, of course, which I produced the history of. It wasn't that many, a dozen possibly. There was about 250 from memory, the people who went, all very primitive. It was an old rundown hotel in Sussex. It wasn't in Surrey, it was Sussex. And the Ravenswood, it was called. And it was £5. That got you as much beer as you could stomach, because it wasn't very tasteful. It was Badger beer, which was foul. I was still a lager lout. So I was drinking what was left of the beer at the lager in the hotel, which got me pissed. But what was exciting about it, all these other hashers turned up from all over. There was a coach turned up from Edinburgh. There's overseas hashers from Indonesia. There was a load of expats, obviously, hashed abroad. I remember we had an impromptu soccer game, kicking lumps out of each other. It was like multicolored shirts against skins. So they teamed, and we just all piled in. And it was just great fun.
What do you remember about what you expected going in? What was the communication like when you heard about it? Did you know anybody in charge, or?
No, hadn't met another hasher before then. We had our master, our on-sec, was in communication with all the other on-secs, and it was just a notification of a letter, just a photostat folded up and folded in. And I remember he went round the pub several weeks before saying he wanted a fiver. So we all wrote checks out for a fiver. He put them in an envelope and sent it off. So that was it. And then we had an instruction back, which was just a little sketch, which, if I can find it, I'm able to find it here. Yeah, if I hold that up, you may be able to see can you see
the map to Ravenswood?
That was the map that we had to follow to get to the venue. Old cows had been in there the previous week, so there was cowpats all over the meadow. There was nettles and thistles knee high. So it was real rustic camping, but no one minded, no one bothered. The shower facilities with the standpipe, which was fantastic. We just hosed each other down after we'd been out on the run. Yeah, that was it really. On it went, and it seemed such a good idea. But of course, Cambridge, it was actually going to be Donington, to get the historical bit right. It was actually going to be Donington, but they couldn't put it together. And so Cambridge stepped in for 83 and took the job on.
Was Donington booked to do it? And
down to do it.
Yeah,
Donington was down to do it. I don't know how it was decided. I wasn't privy to, but it was Donington hash. They were quite big in those days. One of the eldest hashes going in the UK. So they were down to do it. I couldn't put it through. Warren, Desange, the Bear, put his hat in the ring and said, we'll do it. And so they did, and they made it. It's one of my favourite Nash hashes.
I want to find out about what was going on at that first trail, and then we'll look specifically at the book that you put together. But were people taking photos? Did people have little old film cameras there, or were people?
Yes, they did.
Notes?
Yes, they did. A lot of the book contains black and white photos. Yeah, there's an old one of Jerry.
Yeah.
So they're all black and white, and Steve Dormouse took many of those photographs contained in the book. Himself, his wife, sister Anna, the brewer, who is an Edinburgh hasher, and me are the four remaining people who've been to every single UK Nash hash.
Wow. Did you meet them there? Did you know them at the first one?
As you do in a bar. Didn't have a big conversation. I knew Steve because he used to carry a huge camera around with him to all the events back in those days. A Minolta, big thing. He used to take a lot of photographs. I knew him from there. Didn't know his wife so much. But yeah, knew Charlie, of course. Yeah, Charlie was good old soak. He likes a pint, as we all did. So yeah, so we're the four survivors left.
Wow. When did the idea of that there was a set of survivors come in? How far into the Nash hash history you say, hey, there's only been a handful?
I don't know, to be honest. It's just probably the last 6 UK Nash hashes we thought we've got to keep going now type of thing. We can't drop out now. We've got to keep going. It's been close. There's been illness. I almost missed Kelso because I was in hospital about 3 weeks before, but I managed to get there. Life-changing order, but that's another story. I'll put it on record now. I'm going to try and organise a survivors get-together pre-UK Nash hash. I'm going to try and get hold of the survivors, and we'll get a local pub somewhere, meet up before we go to Nash hash, and just celebrating the fact that we're still about and we've been to every single one. I think it's pretty momentous. It's 44 years of 22 events. There's not many. There's only 4. I know they always go on about the Interhash survivors, but we're the UK survivors, and I think we ought to be able to doff our cap and toast ourselves. There's no other bugger's going to do it for us, are they? This is hash, so we know what it's like. No one's going to give us a T-shirt or a hat to say, that's what hash is about. There's no harm in us standing together in a bar and raising a glass for each other. So that's what I'm going to plan to do. I may even ask Jerry along as the founder to give a speech.
In fact, there are no more interhash survivors.
Ah.
Yeah, health, death, and everything else has taken everybody away. So for a long-standing event that started just 3 years after the first World Interhash, you may be the longest running survivors of a biennial event.
Well, there's something then.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive and significant. How did you get involved with the idea of making the book, and what was the process of getting those photos and
For several years, I used to produce a UK magazine called The Hash Hack. So I had writing editorial tendencies, should we say, and I always write everything up, practically everything up. I always write it up. And so that's how it started. And I wrote a book about the first 6, which took me to 91. And it was just a celebration one. It wasn't very good. It was a rough thing, but a few people had it and handed it around. And then the next one I organized, which was in 93 in Rencombe. And it wasn't too long after that, after you've been an organizer of one, been heavily involved in one, it becomes your baby. It becomes your event. It means so much more to you than just turning up and going on the lash and going home. It becomes part of you, really. So I had a fondness for it from there on in, really, a real fondness. Sometimes it's been outspoken. Sometimes it's been nurturing. But it's always been in the best interests of the UK hash fraternity to speak up and help people who organise it or who perhaps don't quite go the way that it ought to go. So yeah, I've been down that road a few times. So that's how the book started. Actually, it was Uncle Jerry again. Our paths do cross quite a lot. We were in Oxford with their Nash hash, chatting as we do, and we've noticed that hashes move on, they get old, they don't hash anymore, the new ones come through, and they don't quite know the origins of how things started. No one gives a shit where things started. They just want to have a run, follow a trail, have a beer and get off home, whatever. He said, isn't it about time you updated the history? So I went away and thought about it, and I thought, this is too good just to let to slide away so no one just knows anything about it. He said, how did it start? Where did it start? Who was involved? So we didn't want that. So painstakingly, I started to write up the back issues, meet people again, go around getting photographs of people. So it took probably 2 or 3 years to pull together. By that time, another Nash hash had rolled in, so it was an ongoing process. It was the 20th anniversary in Kelso, which is what I produced it for. I thought 20 Nash hashes, that's a pretty good target. That's what I went for, and the uptake was good. And so, yeah, so we sold quite a few. I think there's about 5 copies left. We're out of print now. I do need to update it with York, Kelso and York, but if the demand was there, I've got all the notes written up. I could do it. I could, an ongoing publication, as it were. So, yeah.
With there only being 22 Nash Hash GMs, it's a pretty exclusive club. Those other survivors, have any of them also been a UK Nash Hash GM or been involved in organizing?
I don't think Charlie, the brewer, Charlie Tuck, he wasn't GM of Edinburgh when Edinburgh did theirs in 91. That was a character called George Wilkes, who was an infamous character. That was their only real go at it. I'm sure he's been involved with other duties on committees, etc., but not the spearhead or the mug at the front. Yeah.
What was the scope of the Hash Hack, that publication? How often did you do it, and who was it for, and what happened to those?
That came about in Edinburgh in '89 at the UK Nash Hash, where we were, of course, getting the Harrier International from beloved Tim Hughes, Magic. We always signed up and had that. Of course, it came across to us. In those days, it was airmail, for those who can remember airmail. It was always out of date. It was always events that had gone past or something like that. So although it was a tenuous way of keeping in touch with things that were happening worldwide. So I mooted it at the Nash in Edinburgh. And then, of course, I got in touch with the great man himself. I said, listen, this is what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think? And of course, Tim was his wonderful, charming self, and he couldn't have been more supportive and wished me the best of luck, supported me, gave everything he could to me, which was a delight. So off it started. I ran it. It was 4 issues a year by subscription. People, again, trusted me and sent off their checks in envelopes, and they had it. I've got a few here. That was a sort of a magazine that used to go out. And
those were great. Who's that?
His name was Brillo. I don't think I've got anybody famous on the front, but that was quite an amusing one. See that?
What's going on there?
He's pissing into a cement mixer.
He's not really doing it. That's
who knows? Yeah, so that was the hack that got me into that. And of course, it connected me with everybody in the UK. Knew everybody. I hashed all over the country. People were very generous. I'd crash at their place and go hashing with them, etc. So it was a great period. So Magic was on board. There was an American guy, I think it was Mr. Spock, who used to run an American newsletter. He, of course, was he? And all the on-secs used to send me all their material by post. They used to send me newsletters, their latest bags, whatever. And so all the information I had at my fingertips and just pulled it all together all the time. It's still lamented. It's much missed. The internet came along and was meant to solve a lot of problems. But we're less connected now than we ever were before. People used to know people's home addresses, telephone numbers off the top of their head. They don't now. And when committees change, they don't always update the details on the internet on there. And so you're floundering to get that. So that continuity has been lackness, really. I did have the pleasure to meet Tim, and it was in '92 in Phuket. He and I were obviously corresponding, so we made a pact to meet up. So we had lunch together, and a lovely photograph somewhere of him and I. Had a big Mexican moustache in those days, and I was dark and swarthy, but now it's very thin and grey now. But yeah, we had lunch, and yeah, it was very sad when not too long after we learned about Tim's demise.
Yeah, I saw him in '96 at Cypress Center Hash.
Oh yeah.
Your stories of Tim's support are just so, that's the story of magic. I was at Cypress about a week ahead, and we put up the bunting around the whole thing to keep people from looking through the fence. We post-holed and wrapped the whole place, and he showed up from Thailand to work for a week ahead of it. Yeah, but so just working all day, post-holing and wrapping this thing with Tim Hughes, this great figure of hashing story. And he would do anything for the hash.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, he was, nothing but fondness for the man. Of course, I knew his sister quite well, Mango, who was a corn hasher. Yeah, she was good fun.
How did you get the name Robo the Human Sponge?
Robo the Human Sponge. We didn't go in for hash names at our club back then. Everybody still does call me Robbo. But the Human Sponge tag goes back in part to Bunter. Bunter Kavanagh, Terry Kavanagh, ex-Cambridge, ex-Falklands, or wherever he went from. He was the MC in Cambridge for the Nash Hash in '83. And they had a down competition. Being a young buck of that age, I felt that I should have a go at doing it, etc. There was this big build-up for me, where it was do not blink, you'll miss it, one twitch of the tonsils, Moses parted the Red Sea, but Robbo can drink it. Here is the human sponge. So that's where it came from. Of course, I went on stage, and vessel was about, 3 pints or something, huge, great big thing. I lifted it up. I drank a little bit of it, but it hit the bottom of the canister, as these things do. And then this torrent of beer just came. I nearly drowned. Someone threw a life ring on the stage because they thought I was going to drown. So that's that. So the human sponge, that's where the human sponge stuff.
When you're putting the book together, the history of the UK Nash hash, what were some of the surprising things? You had been there, but I'm sure you learned some things or rechecked your memories.
Surprising things. Sometimes organizers steer away from the things that hashers really think about most. And there was I won't name any name or do any pack drill, but there was one Nash hash that I got into trouble with because they started to charge too much for the ticket, but they were going to offer cordon bleu cooking. And so I said, you've doubled the cost from the last event. People don't want fancy cutlery, and it's an army that marches on its stomach. The hash marches on its stomach. As long as it's hot and wholesome, we're standing in a queue. We don't mind standing in a queue. We haven't got to have people in flunkies, in white gloves, in dinner jackets. But they seem to think this was a great idea. So anyway, it didn't happen because it was the backlash. No one wanted to go, etc. I was persona non gratis for a while, but we've got over it. And it's just one of those things. But yeah, again, it's just speaking up for the hashery. But those sorts of things surprised me. Another one was we had a professional comedian at a Nash, again, which didn't hit the mark at all. That didn't go down well. They don't mind a hasher standing at 2 or 3 jokes, but they don't want to that. So that got, we had bread rolls and booze. So just those sorts of things where they sit in a committee room and think, I've got this great idea.
Yeah.
And and of course, it's not really what the hash wants. Yeah, I've had to stick my head above the parapet a few times and say, the other thing that makes the United Kingdom Nash hash unique is the fact that we do roughing it. We do like camping. And a lot of overseas people just don't get that gig. But it's unique to the United Kingdom. When we started, we didn't have disposable income. We were 20-something for Christ's sake. We didn't have any money. So pitching up, putting a tent up, and falling in that at midnight after a belly full of beer was all we wanted. The host part the next day was fine. Hash moves on, of course it does. People do want showers and dormitories, fine, etc. But the idea that the UK Nash hash can just go and take a strip of hotels somewhere, put it all in there, it's not certainly, I'm not interested in that. The balance is quite good at the moment. For overseas people who fly in, catch a taxi and whatever, they can have a dorm to sleep in. But for the locals, the nationals, they can pitch up in a motorhome now. I've mainly got motorhomes, which is great. Or there's still Organ Steel Camp, which keeps that ticket price down. Although, of course, we're off to London this year, which we all pay through the nose for going to the big smoke.
Yeah, there are a lot of national and international events now. Inter-Americas started after the UK Nash hash. There is an America Nash hash that has gotten off the ground, and recently they've been doing camping. Recently, the last couple definitely have been all camping. So that is very distinctive. What about other events that you've gone to, and where do you think, apart from the camping nature of it, what do you like about some other international events? You obviously went to Phuket, World Inter Hashes. What else have you done in travel?
I've fallen out of flavor with a lot of it of late. The last one I did, I think, I did Goa. That was 2022. 24 was Cardiff, so I did that one. I don't think I've been since. My first one was 88. I went to Bali, good old Victor.
Night chart.
Yeah, Victor Mason. But of course, that was when KL were doing their 50th. So I went through KL first and had about 3 weeks out there hashing, which was pretty special. Met the great John Duncan. We blew the breeze, etc., with John. So we have quite a character he was. So Bali, where else? Phuket, Goa, Cardiff. There's a Cyprus. So I've done about 5 or 6. I think there's one I can't remember now. But yeah.
As an organizer and a survivor of UK Nash Hash, which is the size is 500, 600, 700, what did you think of those bigger events? How'd they work for you?
Yeah, no, the big events, of course. Yeah, that's part of the reason why I lost favor with it. When you get 4,000, 5,000, you lose it really. You don't. I've been in the airport lounge on the way home, and I've seen a hasher that has been there for 3 weeks, and he's on one flight and I'm on another flight, and we haven't had a beer. So yeah, those sorts of things, it becomes very unmanageable. So that was a problem. I didn't like that the voting seems to be quite a controversial. Yeah, pull a face seems that's an odd sort of setup. So again, whereas I was back in the day, I'd happily put a check in an envelope to somebody. These days, transferring funds to somebody that I don't know. We used to know everybody, didn't we? Whether it was Digit, we knew Digit, for whoever we were sending our money off to, we knew them and we trusted them because they were one of us. They were hashers. They weren't a face behind the screen, really. It's a double-edged sword with me. It's the numbers have got too high and the trustworthiness of the event. I know they've stuck a council in to try and mediate things or get things right, but I'm not sure how well that's working, but who knows? My wife is a keen hasher, Dr. Foster, and she hasn't been to an Interhash. So it'd be nice to go along to say that we've been to one, yeah.
Where did you meet her?
I didn't meet her on the hash. I met her through business. I fell in love. It was my second marriage. And it was one of those situations where if she doesn't like hash, I'm gonna have to give up hash. But thank God she loves hash. She's a big instrument behind me and with the new hash that we formed in 2019. She's done about 5 Nash hashes now. So yeah, she's been hashing about 12 years now. So she's got her spurs. So, yeah.
You've done a lot of writing and publishing and organizing as a GM of one of the UK Nash Hashes. What about forming a club? Why did you decide to form a club? What was the process with that?
I was with the Cheltenham hash for 38 years, so I was there quite a long time. And as sometimes these things happen, the meeting of hash minds sometimes doesn't meet anymore. After a period of, it was about 6 months it was, of twiddling my thumbs and thinking, what am I going to do next? I had lots of text messages and messages from people and things. I remember the hashes in the area. And said, why don't you start your own? Why don't you start your own hash up? For goodness sake, you've been doing it forever. So you know everybody, you know everything. Why don't you start your own? So I thought, why not? We tested the water. We had a few trial runs and we had a good turnout. That was in 2018. So we thought we'll go live in 2019. So we formed in 2019. And yeah, we're still going strong. Yeah, 2 years ago, we celebrated our 100th run because we run fortnightly. We hired a rugby club in the Cotswolds at Stow-on-the-Wold. We had about 90 hashers turn up from all over the country. We gave them a good time. And in fact, we had one guy who came all the way from the States. Floppy Dix, his name is. I don't know if you've ever come across Floppy Dix. I had an email from him and he said, oh, where can you put me up? Thinking it's a hotel or complex, etc. I said, we're out of town. We're in the boonies. We're in the country. So there's no hotels. And oh, okay. He said, so how do I get there? Is there a train? I said, no, there's no train. There's no. Okay. I said, anyway, but he said, I'm coming. So he sent his money and he registered. So this guy, Floppy Dix, had never been out of the States before. Flew into Gatwick or Heathrow, wherever it was, hired a Tesla, drove all the way to the Cotswolds, and we're sat at registration, and in comes this yank. And I said, my God, I don't believe it. He's turned up. He's actually turned up. And we had a goodie bag ready for him and a T-shirt and all the rest of it. And he loved it. Everybody took him under his wing, and they took him down the local pub that night. He got smashed on English ale, and he slept in his car all weekend.
And I hope there was a charging station out in the boondocks.
I don't know how he managed for that. Yeah, a very good question. I don't know how he managed for that. There must have been somewhere. Yeah, floppy dick. And he keeps in touch with one of the guys on our hash. He travels still. He does wear our T-shirt, which is great. Yeah, so does him. So that's the beauty of hash, isn't it? That is just how it works. So we had a very good weekend. We got our 150th in a couple of weekends' time. We're having a choir to do. We're having a picnic, and hopefully the weather will be good. So we'll have a few beers.
What's that club called? How did you figure out what the traditions, logo, etc., would be when you start a new club?
There's a few hashes in Gloucestershire, so we didn't want to tread on other people's toes, really, where other people were hashing, because there's enough markings. And so we thought, let's go to an area where people don't run necessarily, or we chose an area where the pubs are small. All the other hashes are quite big. There's 40 or 50 plus, where we wouldn't attract that. We have 20, maybe 22, something like that on average, which is a nice number. So the area that we chose, we've done all the tatty areas, the rundown areas, and we've ran all around there where there's broken glass and graffiti. Let's go somewhere nice. Let's go somewhere which is lovely to run in. So we chose the northeast-west Cotswolds. And the northeast-west is NEW, which is obviously an acronym. So that's where the new Cotswolds come from. So that was the name chosen, and that's generally where we operate. So our centre point is Stow-on-the-Wold, and we go out sort of either 30 miles or 40k either side.
I want to ask you about the Hash Founders Club.
Yeah, they send out caps.
Yeah,
I do know about it. Yeah, Deep Throat used to do it, I think, but I think
Eiffel Tower
another guy does it now.
is the
That's right.
New York Eiffel Tower.
He came in hash with us, Eiffel, with the new Cotswold, which is great because he heard we were the best hash in the area. So he came straight to run with us.
Yeah.
So that's what he says. So he came to run with us, the new Cotswolds, and he actually did a write-up for our magazine. And so I know all about the caps, and he was badgering me to have one, etc. But I haven't taken him up on it yet. But I said, perhaps the next time he hashes with us, then he can badger me again, and I'll relent.
I want to ask you about the history of the UK Nash hash. What you can say from behind the scenes. Like you said, sometimes you have to raise up and have a word with people if they're going off course. At what point did it seem like this will likely last forever? And were there any points where are we going to have somebody host the next one? Were there some risk areas at times?
We went through a golden period pretty much from 93 for a few years after that. We went 93, which was Cheltenham and Cotswold, which I fronted. Then we had North Hants, which is another military established hatch, they had 500 plus, and Guildford. Then it was Norfolk. And then we started getting into a phase where people were actually bidding into Hashstar, where there'd be two bids put forward. Two absolutely stonking, cracking bids that you thought, can't you save yours for 2 years and we'll have yours in 2 years' time? But the hashes peak, don't they? They come at a time with a committee and an enthusiasm, and you've got to hit those hashes at the right time, otherwise they fade away and they're gone forever. We had a few periods where it was just unbelievable, the bids that we had. Scotland normally do it every 10 years, so that's a banker. So we've had Edinburgh. The latest one, of course, was Aberdeen based, but all the Scots all mucking together and they all combine, which is great. We have had a couple of ones where we've had to step in, or individuals have, characters within the UK hash. There's a guy called Twonk down in Norfolk who stepped in to form the Ancient Britons. Wasn't a hash, but so Norfolk wasn't as keen or as enthusiastic as what Twonk was. So I think they took one step back, said you're on your own, but he was keen to do it. So he formed, and with like-minded people, he got that going. And the same happened for, what were they called? There's one in Rentham. I can't think what they were called. I'll have to look at what they were called. But Stretch was the character who put that together.
Right. Yeah.
That was in 2003. And he had to form a hash. Severn Valley. He formed a hash called the Severn Valley hash. And again, used people in that area to come on board and help put it together. So that's been a couple of times. We had, of course, COVID, which flattened the Yorkshire, although eventually, of course, Yorkshire did do it. But there was no one in the frame to do it before Yorkshire did it. That was a surprise bid. And of course, as soon as you say, we want to do it in 2 years' time, wherever it gets out, whether it's in a bar somewhere or on a text message or whatever, then everybody else stands down, don't they? Think, oh, great, we ain't got to bother about that. We ain't got to worry about it then. So they took it on. And we're grateful that the London, Bonnie and the Combined Hashes of London have stepped in for this year's event. There is a rumour that Devon are in the frame to do it in 2 years' time. So again, that looks likely. Yeah, it looks to continue.
If we look through Interhash, there have been voting issues. Sometimes the ballots people were photocopying them. There's been some crazy stuff happening. Has there been any controversies through the history of the UK Nash Hash?
No, it's pretty. No, we don't have spoilt papers or ballots or anything like that. It's just a good old-fashioned show of hands, really. No, we have a GM's meeting like anything else. There are sort of annual hashes, but if he's a member, we try and have genuine hashes who, they just made one up the weekend before, and they've created a position for themselves to vote, as it were. Yeah, so that doesn't happen. There is a little bit of that. It was never enough to sway any decision. No, they've all been great in their own way. They've all been great, and we really owe all the hash who organise these things a debt of gratitude, really, because without them, we wouldn't be able to go hashing.
Yeah, the UK Nash Hash being a camping type event, you're at the whims of the weather. I only attended Speyside, and that was kind of rainy, I think. It is a great event. You mentioned COVID. What impact did that have on the new Cotswold, and how'd you guys had been established not that long? How'd you make that through COVID?
We were fortunate or proactive during the period. We got to learn from an old hash buddy, Amnesia, who was from Bicester. And he got to hear about a clause where you could go out in pods of 6 and run and all the rest of it. So that's what we did. We applied for a special license to a council, to the Cotswold District Council, which allowed gatherings of people, as long as it wasn't over, can't remember what the number was now, maybe 24, which was fine. As long as we stayed in pods of 6, as long as we had all these big, long terms and conditions, etc., and we all spaced and outside with social distance, that's social distancing, then we could hash. So incredibly, of course, all the other hashes in the area closed down. They didn't run. Obviously, it was scary times. Some didn't want to go out at all and play. Some wanted it for their mental health. We need to get out and see people and just be normal again. So it did a great deal for a lot of people who lived on their own, didn't see anybody for weeks on end. So to have the hash running or have something there for them was very special for them. So we had on our Facebook, we had waiting lists of hashes from all of it. Can we come and run with you? So we ended up saying, okay, yeah, you're the last one in. If someone drops out, you can come in. So we had to have it put quite strictly. But people were traveling from distances just to come out and run with the hash. Before pubs opened, we'd bring your own beer and we'd social distancing with chairs and we'd be out on a common, something like that. We got over it, managed it, and we got through it. And we got over it, and it's a proud boast that we hashed through COVID.
Wow. Were there any lasting changes in the way you operated, though? For example, in Toronto, we used to have a bedpan that we passed around to drink together. And COVID said, no, use your own cup, and it's never come back. Was there any other lasting impact?
No, none at all. No, we don't have a communal cup, as it were. we don't drink out of new shoes and things like that, but we have a boot, an old hash boot, which is white, big, and the beer goes not directly into a glass in the cup, and they drink out of that. So that's with us. That's our down for hares or misdemeanors, etc. That's what someone gets if they run with the new. They're going to drink out of the old boot.
Well, you're on 44, 45 years of hashing soon, and you've met several of the legendary people, Duncan and Magic Hughes, who started way back and are gone now. What about changes in the hash? 38 years with one club, things change, but what about the world of hashing? You have strong clubs there, the UK Nash hash surviving since 40 some years. It's pretty impressive that any organization and event can survive all this time, but things change, the world changes.
It does, yeah. I called it a little while ago. I mentioned the golden age, the golden years of hashing, where there was less expectation from hashers. You would turn up at a hash event for the weekend, and it's like, if there was some food, it was bonus. You didn't expect food. That was like great. And I always tell the tale of when I went away hashing and they started giving out t-shirts. And the reason they gave you a t-shirt was that you had something clean to wear home, because you slept in you slept in that all weekend. So at least you had a t-shirt to put on, to go home, to drive home with. That was what I was told, where the t-shirt comes from. Because you've lived and slept and hashed and did everything in it. You danced in it all night. You've crashed out in it. You stunk in the morning, but at least you had a fresh t-shirt to put on to go back home. Whereas things that crept in, there's a bit of hash tourism that sort of creeps in, where it's that people organise events away from hash but put a hash title on it. I'm not that keen on that. If you want to go to a hash event, go to a hash event, tag a holiday on after that, do your own thing afterwards. But I don't need to be with 80, 100 hashers while I'm sightseeing, walking up a mountain. That's just me, but that's just personal taste. But the UK hash, no, we're British and we organise things. I think that's partly down to it. I think we've got some good organisers in the country, and that stable of being able to organise something, I think, is deep-rooted. I think overseas hashers possibly not, but the Brits, I think, generally pull a good show on.
It's interesting.
I know that will sound awful for all your other viewers and listeners.
But there's a part of that from this golden age of the 80s and 90s where clubs were forming everywhere, and things like Africa Interhash and even Interhashes then, a lot of the times it was part of the expats in some of these places.
Precisely.
Because, for example, Cairo, I was there 15 years. We could never host a Inter-Africas because there was going to not be very many people there who committed for 4 more years. They're like, I'll be gone in 2 years. I'll be gone in 4 years with their rotations. So I didn't bid because I was like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we're more in place, aren't we? That's just, if you're a London hasher, that's unless you retire from it or you pack it in or injury but no, that's you just turn up. We went to London a few weeks ago, and of course you ran with the London hash, and it was just great to drop in and find hashers still there that I knew back in the 80s and the 90s. And even though we're all thinner and a little bit wider, we all recognized each other and we can raise a glass together. It's great. It's once you're a hasher that you just stay with it.
One thing is, when the UK Nash hash started, the red dress run had not even been a twinkle in anyone's eye yet. Over the years, red dress run has become a part of some international and national events. The UK Nash hash, what have they done about red dress?
I don't get involved with the red dress run on the Nash hash side of things. I have been on red dress runs, and I quite enjoy them. They were a great vehicle for raising money for local charities. That was predominantly why they start, certainly in the UK. I remember Mr. Beakey down in Bournemouth had a red dress run, and very successful down there, and they raised a lot of money for female cancer. I can't remember which one. I don't remember having one in Kelso. Was another one. They did one. There was a huge one in Kelso, but no, it's not my big driver. In London, I think the Thursday hash, the West London hash on Thursday, are doing something, but I think it's in town. I'm not sure. I haven't signed up for it. I think it's limited. I think it's just their normal run, and they're going to run it. I could be wrong. I remember doing the yellow dress run in Goa. Do you remember doing the yellow dress run in Goa?
Yeah.
Digit went for yellow, but he did. But I can remember doing that. So yeah, I've done them. But I think, of course, in this country, we now have the bra and pants hash. So anybody who is of that persuasion quite happily dons a pair of briefs and a bra and joins in with Audrey and of all sex and in that crowd. That's something else I don't partake in.
Yeah, they just had their 21st anniversary.
That's right.
The weekend before we're talking.
Yeah.
You mentioned Digit, another big figure in hashing who's not with us anymore. What about the hash? You just discussed it. And as you said, once you're a hasher, all this stuff just it becomes the way you approach life and everything, sort of. It's the attitude. But what about hashing from the beginning is important to you? What of the traditions or parts of the hashing experience do you say these are why I love?
I find it's the camaraderie. It's the same vein of humor generally wherever you go. That's what's really carried me all these years is that fact. And everyone's a winner. There's nobody who isn't a winner. Everybody, it doesn't matter what size or shape or creed or anything like that. It's the sort of the uniqueness of it. You do get the odd exception. It was a complete wanker, but yeah, every family has one, don't they? So you've just got to put up with it. I don't know many international characters now because, as I've expressed, I don't go on the international scene. I was very fortunate that I met the who's who, really, of the hash world in the 80s and in the 90s. And they wanted to talk to me as much as I wanted to talk to them, which was great. There doesn't seem to be that huge characters that was around back in those days who carry sway and that can listen. I remember being at an event at an army base in England, and there was a character called Sharky Ward, who was a Wessex hasher. He was an ex-Marine, and there was a bit of a fracas going on in the bar room. There was a lot of trouble. There was a bit of a fight about to start. And he had this huge, great big white moustached beard. If you knew Sharky Ward, big guy. And he just stood up and in just booming voice, he just said, "We're not having this on the hash type of thing." And it just stopped. It quelled it. It just absolutely stopped it because he was right. He was right. If you can't hold your beer, sling your hook, but basically. And so that was a good lesson to thinking, yeah, we're all here to have a good time, really. We're not here to have a fight over whatever it was. But yeah, Sharky Ward sort of quelled it. So it's those big characters that are around then that I miss, really. Now, whether I'm a big character myself or not, I don't know. But I certainly put the weight on since I started in 81.
Personally, I like the idea that the survivors and the founders would get called attention to formally on the stage at events like this. We did this for the interhash survivors, and we started making it a thing at every interhash. So I hope they do it at the UK Nash Hash. I think it's a great thing. Like you said, there's a lot of younger people who don't know anything. And it's not to try to elevate you on a platform, but just to point out, look at that guy. He's
Yeah. No, I'd hate that. Anybody who knows me well knows that I annoyed Dr. Foster, my wife, no end. She says, "You never tell anybody anything. You never tell them. It's me that goes around and says, you've been hashing for you're that." It's because I never. But I did have a nice moment a few weeks ago where I went to a St. George's Day hash, which is an annual event for us Brits here, and it's generally held in the Southwest. There was a few characters there who were younger than me, who, how can we put this, who used to drink to excess and didn't really take much on board, and they were the sort of the assholes I was talking about. They didn't have much of a clue what was going on. As long as there was a pint in their hand and they didn't really do much running, it was just those sorts of characters. Well, all of a sudden, they seem to have sobered up a little bit. And while I was at this event, I can name names. There was Adonis, there was Stretch, and there was Lightning. And there was three guys who were in the area. And they all, as we were talking, instead of me taking ownership of the hash and giving them a sort of the good old days. This is how we want to keep it. We want to keep the authenticity of it. We don't want to sell out and all of this sort of. It was them that was coming back to me and saying, "We want to keep it like this, Robert. This is how we grew up with it. We don't want to change it." And I said to them, "This is what we need." I said, because it's us now to hand it on down to you now. We need to hand that down to you where you take responsibility of it, where if something's not going quite right, you may say, "Hey, this isn't how we do things here in the UK. We don't do it," instead of just letting it slide and regretting it. You've got to come forward and say, "We don't do it like that. We need to do it a different way." So that was a wonderful, refreshing evening to hear the guys speak like that. And yeah, I was touched by that.
That's great. I can understand that would be extremely satisfying. And that's what you hope, that you've had a good time the whole time along. It's a passion of yours, but there is a legacy, that the spirit that you were part of, you see that surviving. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's a really nice story to hear.
Good.
Okay, anybody else you want to mention, or dirty laundry? There's a shirt from 1988 hanging up there, I guess, behind you.
That's Barley, I think. That's probably Barley. I'm not sure about dirty story. I couldn't possibly come out with any dirty stories. But
how about a word about the UK Nash Hash founder, Uncle Jerry, who I just recently interviewed and published? And the same thing, I want to encourage people to shake his hand, buy him a beer and everything else. And you put the pressure on you to take some credit. Give me a story or a comment about Uncle Jerry.
The most one that comes to mind is the one which goes back to the first organising of UK Nash Hash in 1981. Facilities were very primitive. There was a big oak tree in the camping field, and underneath it was a fender box in a tent. A fender box is a little potty, a little loo, which you have to empty. That was the facility for about 250, 300 hashes. So that's what that's what I went to do. So consequently, this filled up relatively quickly. And it fell upon Jerry and another hasher a London hasher called Garbett, who somehow had volunteered to help him empty. Garbett was a little bit inebriated because he'd just come out of the beer tent. It was like, "Come and give me a hand to come and." So off they went into the middle of the field to pick up this potty, which is now brimming and full of you know what. And as they trot along, as they're walking across the field gingerly with this contents, of course, Garbett's a little bit he's a bit unsteady. And so he tips, and half the contents go all over Jerry's trainers. You said you wanted a dirty story. That's the only one I could come up with.
That's fantastic. No, it's very visual. That's fantastic. And we don't have smell vision yet, but yeah, that's great.
No, absolutely.
How are you doing? You're no longer a football player, but how's your health? And have you had injuries or anything through the hash running, and how are you doing?
Injuries. I used to do quite a bit of running. I was quite serious about me running. And so I've done all the usual marathons. I've done London marathons and all those sorts of things, but I've interspersed them with sort of fun events. I've just recently published another book which contains all that. It's called The Escapades. So it's lots of a cocktail of stories on running, drinking games, funny incidents that's happened to me down the years. So that's just been published. Jerry's actually bought a copy, so you can tell how good it is. Jerry's actually bought one.
Yeah. Say the title again more slowly.
It's Escapades. Escapades.
Oh, there it is. All right. Still running after all these beers. That's fantastic. So, yeah. Can you send me a photo of the cover of that? I'll look for it to see if I can find it online somewhere. But
that's the back of it.
Wow. Nice. What about this writing stuff in you? Why are you a writer?
I suppose some people paint. I suppose it's just my outlet. It really is. It's my outlet. I've retired now, and so I've started to go back into it more regular now. Hence the latest book. Shakes, of course, who does the On magazine. I promised him I would write a few articles for, so I'm sure that he'll be leaning on me to help fill the pages, etc. But I enjoy it. And I've got stories, I suppose, like we've chatted today, and I've been doing it a long time. It's nice that people want to listen to these. And I think the podcasts that you do are just incredible. I've picked up on them recently, obviously, with your invitation. And there's a lot of hashes I don't know, but the ones I've seen and I've had a listen to. And one of the things that you say is about keeping their voice alive. I think that's such a lovely sentiment for hashes, because I was listening to Victor on there, on one of his, and you just think, yeah, I'm in his company again. I'm just like I remember. And he didn't swear too much in the.
Yeah.
He was quite keen with the C word, but he didn't actually use it in the whole.
There have been some. Yeah, there have been some great personalities that seem to have come those first couple decades.
All credit to you for getting it going and chatting to your mates, perhaps first of all, but now reaching out and bringing in other hashes that you're not that familiar with. But I've got a story to tell, hopefully.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you on behalf of all the hashers for all you've done, and of course the UK Nash hash and UK hashers, like it or not, owe you a lot for all you've put in over the time.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. And if you ever want to come back and hear some more stories, then please do.
Okay, yeah. And I think Jerry sent me a copy of the UK book. Can I publish that on Facebook? Yeah. I'll encourage it to be spread.
I'll give you an email address as well, which if people are interested, they can. They can come straight to me, and
you can say it here. That's another thing we can put on if you want.
Yeah. If anybody is interested and wants to contact me, then it's 4humansponge@gmail.com.
The numeral 4.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Robbo, thank you very much for your time. And it's been fantastic. And again, just thank you for everything. And it's great to see your attitude all these years. You're a quintessential hasher, and 30, 40 years when we're all gone, they'll say, yeah, I remember him.
Hope so. On.
Yeah, on.
To close the circle, here's the hash anthem sung by Mother Hash.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to